first, I want us to get a check on the crop and harvest numbers. Recent rain and snow has slowed things down, but we're getting back on track. Starting with corn, and 96% of the crop is now mature. Corn harvest is 39% complete, up from 34% last week. 65% of the winter wheat crop is planted. 44% of the crop has emerged. It was at 35% this time last year. On to soybeans, and harvest is 38% complete. That's behind last year's pace of 47% and a 5-year average of 53%. With more on soybeans, Luke Beckman with Central Valley Ag joins us in the market analyst chair this week. We begin our conversation with a look at how this season's weather has been a constant struggle for soybean farmers.
I think it's a little bit early, Troy, to know exactly what the damage or the extent of loss might be. I think guys are getting into the field probably as we're sitting down to have this conversation. So they'll know, they'll find out what's out there. I think it creates a conversation where, the yield last Friday in the USDA numbers, or last week, excuse me, saw the soybean yield go up. Do we see an opportunity for that to be pared back, just depending on what the extent of loss is? So I think harvest loss from shattered pods, and then what sort of quality issues are we going to run into? Those are probably the two main concerns for farmers.
Any recommendations for farmers who are feeling it pretty bad right now?
Well, I think if you have quality concerns with those soybeans that are coming out, it probably just depends on what your plan is. If you were planning on binning those beans on farm, a quality problem that goes into the bin will probably get worse, as it stays there. So you may need to readjust your plans. You're not going to be able to hold those beans as long, which means you're not going to be able to capture, the carry like maybe you thought you would. So I think you need to have some conversations with your crop insurance agent about, how that impacts your yield, and there may be some claims that are available in those types of situations. So I think you have to just look at what you have in the field and make decisions based on what's there.
Okay, so taking a look at the crop progress report, USDA showed that soybean harvest at 38%, so that's 6% above where we were for harvest last week. The majority of soybean producing states running behind also. Any room for optimism with those numbers?
At face value, obviously we're behind. I think the market's more concerned about what does the next 6 to 10 days look like. It looks great. I think we're going to see a majority of soybean harvest get completed by the end of October with this open week. So I don't think that's a concern anymore. It was, I think, coming in Monday, the weekend weather was part of the reason for the friendly day on Monday. But I think that overall soybean harvest, we're going to have our hands around it, in another week or 2 weeks. It was a good crop before we had the weather. We'll know more in 7 to 10 days.
What are some other things you've been following? Maybe some good opportunities for 2019?
Absolutely. I mean, Monday this past week, beans having, a strong day, corn having a strong day. We saw the export inspections numbers on Monday. We had a cargo of beans out of the Gulf, a cargo of beans out of the PNW. That had China attached to them. Is there any depth to that? Probably not, but I think that psychologically it was supportive enough to get beans through some key technical objectives. And all of a sudden the charts look a lot better. I think what that does is it just gives farmers a good opportunity to, make sales. If they're beans that are coming to town in the fall, we've really been talking to guys about what does that farm average look like, even with sales, down at these levels, if you can layer those into better sales you made early, and then you talk about the market facilitation program, and how does that work into the farm average that you're going to achieve for the year.
And so you're with Central Valley Ag. What are some of the big questions farmers have been asking you guys this time of year, and what do you tell them?
Sure. I think that, with the rally that we've had, some questions about 2019. We've actually seen pretty good engagement from our farmer producers in the deferred months, and that's both for old crop soybeans, old crop corn, and new crop corn. I'd say new crop soybeans, guys are a little more patient yet, but DC19 futures are above $4. A question we always like to ask our guys, at least recently, has been, what % of your corn crops in the last 4 years have you sold north of $4 December futures? And I think it gives people an opportunity to think about that, and there's a lot of conversations going on between the new crop corn and soybean price ratio, and corn needs to steal some acres because we do have a nice demand story going on. So we should see higher corn prices. And I don't disagree with the argument, but I think that can be a little bit dangerous. When you're presented with the opportunity, I think that's more important. And so it's giving us an opportunity to get some sales on north of 4, especially if producers are looking at 2019 inputs. If they've booked fertilizer, if they're starting to look at seed, you're making some of those purchases. I think you can hedge those input costs by selling grain at the same time.
Okay, and before we let you go, there was the news regarding ethanol and E15 last week. Trump has that push to get that into gas stations year-round by next summer. What are your thoughts?
Well, I certainly think it's positive. I do not think it's going to be a fast-moving news story. There's going to be litigation. There's going to be the rulemaking process that precedes that by the EPA. And then you have to question the infrastructure upgrade across the country, for a lot of these gas stations to carry that. I think it's been well documented that 1%, of the fueling stations across the U.S., are even equipped to handle it. So there's just a lot of things that need to happen. Is it positive? It is. I just think it's going to take some time before, we can really see this translate into, higher ethanol demand.